in these villages, and just really, really good people. This is the street in front of the church building. So there's no cars here. Okay? It's just donkeys and horses and bicycles and boats. The river is just, see the row of trees on the right, the river is just off to the right. And if you look on that building on the left, you see the watermark. So again, two or three months out of the year, that river's flooded, and people just have to walk around in the water. I cannot imagine what that must be like. In fact, one of them said it's like Venice. We just go around in canoes from place to place. So, okay, all right, good for you. This is another sister in the area. We gave a Bible to that day. She was thrilled to get that, and the big thing for her was it was large print. She could actually read it, and so that was a big deal for this sister. After services, it's really hot. Some of the ladies, somebody decided to kill one of the chickens for lunch so we could eat lunch. And while we're waiting on the chicken to be prepared, we're all thirsty, so the guys decided to get down some coconuts for us to drink out of. So there you go. We knocked down some coconuts, and I had some coconut water while I was there. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. So, yeah, so natural flavored water, right? So anyway, okay, later that afternoon, Sunday afternoon, we went up the river to a place called Plagitas. That's the church building. Now, let me tell you, Plagitas is probably the most remote location I've ever been in. I've been in some remote places, but this is the tops. And the poverty here is staggering. All right? That's the church building. Okay? You see the watermark. Okay? But if you get up closer to that, it's even higher from time to time. And inside the building, there's nothing. They don't keep anything in there because of the flooding issue. But that's the church building there. And so to get to Plagitas, that's our transportation. All right? So these are wooden canoes, and we start out about 4 o'clock that afternoon, and we're gonna canoe up the river against the current. There's 6 of us going to be in the canoe. So here we go. So I'm on the back, I'm paddling, and then the brother in front of me, his name is Jaime too, and so he's paddling, and then his daughter there, and then Jaime's the one who took this picture, and then behind him is Pedro Castro, who I'll talk more about in a minute, and then one of the other church members is at the front of the boat with a pole, and as we're paddling, he's got a pole, and he's pushing the boat along as well, because the current was pretty strong that we're paddling against, going upstream. So it's about an hour and a half canoe ride upstream to Plagitas. And along the way you see local wildlife. That's an iguana. They taste like chicken. So I'm told. But at one point I saw about 6 or 8 of those all around. They're everywhere. So we're on this canoe, and about halfway upriver, the thunderstorm of all thunderstorms comes up. And it's the first time I'm cold in Colombia, because the water coming out of this thunderstorm was really cold. And it went on, there was wind and lightning, the whole 9 yards. It was miserable. And we just kept right on going upriver. I will never forget that trip, okay? I've now canoed somewhere to preach the gospel, and on the way, you have this. But it was quite the thunderstorm, and as you can tell, it dumped a lot of water. So here we are at Plagitas. We've just gotten off the boat, and that's the typical street in the town. And I don't know if you can tell by that picture, but I am soaked. There is not a dry part on my body. And Jaime and all of us who rode the boat, it's the same. It's terrible. We're just drenched. But again, the poverty, unbelievable in this town. Not a paved street. Just water everywhere. You can see everything floods. And the church in Plajitas has about 10 members. But they knew we were coming, and they did a lot to invite people from the community. And people came, as you'll see. Now this is an interesting picture. That rainstorm, that thunderstorm we went through, scared up some local wildlife. And this is a sister in the congregation, and she found these turtles. And she's going to cook them that night. Okay, I didn't eat them. Which, by the way, this is another thing. There was a family there that took us in that night, that afternoon, to keep us there. And the night before, the power had gone out. And evidently, sometime on Saturday, someone in her family had gone and killed a deer somewhere out in the area, and had brought that deer in, and because I knew we were coming. And that night, the power went out, so the meat was not able to be refrigerated. And the next day, Henry and Carlos Julio had gone up on Sunday morning, and she had got that meat out. It was already going bad. But she cooked it anyway and served it. And so by the time Jaime and I and Pedro got there, she had more of that meat, and she cooked it for us. I didn't eat that. I just couldn't do it. I ate everything else on the plate but that. But they're just going out of their way to try to make us feel welcome. And I will eat most anything, but rancid meat is just not for me. But this lady found some turtles, and she was going to eat those later that night. So here's typical street in Plajitas. Again, very remote. Only way you get there is by river. And more kids. And so they gathered around just to see what I was all about. I guess I stood out for some reason. But here we are that night. And now again, this church only has 10 members. All right? But they got out and told people we were coming. And the same kind of deal. As we preached out in the street, people coming from everywhere listening to us preach. It was just incredible. And just an experience I'll never forget. The service ended that night about 9:30. Back on the boat, down the river in the dark. Back down to El Doral that night. And then the next morning, we're on our way. And we rode back to El Banco, got in our truck, loaded it up, and drove 5.5 hours to the coast to Barranquilla. So we have a service at Barranquilla on Monday night, March the 18th. This is in, Barranquilla is like the 4th most important city in Colombia. It's on the coast. And so the standard of living is a little more up to date, I guess, compared to where we had been. It certainly felt like it. And there's a church. This is where Pedro Castro preaches. He's one of the local evangelists in that area. He travels all over the area that we were traveling to work with these churches at his own expense. He lives on about $500 a month. And he has a family of 5. He lives in a rented home. It was one of the nicer ones as far as what we had compared to what we had seen earlier in the trip. Still, by our standards, he doesn't live on much at all. But the church of Barranquilla meets in this little rented facility, and that picture really doesn't do it justice. That was toward the beginning of the service, and by the end, that place, there's standing room only. People just kept coming in, and it was that way everywhere we went to speak that night. That's a little bit better. There's people all back on the street outside. People sitting back behind the window, out on the sidewalk, listening to the preaching that's going on. Just phenomenal to see the potential and the desire of people to want to hear the gospel there in that place. This is Pedro and his family, a daughter and 2 sons, and his wife. Pedro is 34, I believe. And he and his wife have been married, I think, about 15 years. I may be wrong on that. It's some of these things run together. But anyway, this man, he is responsible for establishing many congregations across the north coast of Colombia, and as well as going into existing churches that were denominational and converting them over to the Lord's church. He's done an incredible job. And I am just so impressed with his example and how he's raising his family and the dedication he has. He is a great, great man. And again, we spent the majority of our trip with him, so I got to know him pretty well with that. Just a good person. The next night, Tuesday night, we were in Turbaco, which is basically, we would call it a suburb of Cartagena. Anybody heard of Cartagena? It's on the coast, kind of a resort city. It's an old city built back in the 1500s. The Spanish had a fort there. You can still see the walls from their fort. Turbaco sits about 15 miles from that. There's a small church in Turbaco that meets in a person's garage. And earlier in the day, before we got to Turbaco, many of the Christians work in Cartagena. And one of the brothers sitting right there to the right of Jaime, he works in Cartagena. He's a government official. And we met in his government office and had a Bible study with several of his co-workers. And there's the potential that if those people want to continue studying, and there may be a church that gets started in Cartagena as a result of this and some of the other work that's going on. So you would have a church in Turbaco as well as Cartagena. It's incredible, okay? And they want to get a work started in Cartagena. And some of these people, if they obey the gospel, may be the beginning of that church. But this was a productive study. It lasted a couple hours. You had people from several different religions gathered there together that afternoon, asking questions, wanting to know what the gospel is, and all of that. So it was a fantastic afternoon there together. Here we are later that night in Turbaco with the Christians there. And again, this is just in a lady's garage. She is a tour guide person in Cartagena, and she owns the house that this garage is in, and she bought the house for her mother, who's elderly. And they use that garage for the church to meet in. And so it was really good to get to know those people as well. The sister right to my right, smiling, she's the sister that owns that property where the church meets there. And one of the things that she talked a lot about is, why can you only be here one night? We need you to come back and stay for a week or 2 weeks. We want to be able to go and preach and teach and reach the community. They just begged us to come back and stay longer. Guys, they are hungry for the gospel. And these are people, again, that will sit there for 2-3 hours at a night and listen to the gospel. And really stay keyed in on it. So it's really incredible. Okay, then Wednesday and Thursday, the week before last, we were in a place called Lorica. And on the way to Lorica, we stopped by. This is the Caribbean. And we just had to get out in the ocean for a minute and cool off because it's 100 degrees. And the water wasn't much cooler than that. But it was a nice welcome break for that. Later that afternoon, we were on our way to a Bible study, and Jaime let me drive. We got stuck. Long story short, Jaime was complaining about the road. We were driving an hour and a half or 2 hours to get out to this place. And Jaime's complaining about the road. Oh, it's so terrible. And I said, this is nothing. I used to drive stuff worse than this in South Dakota. He said, well, here, you drive. Okay. So we started off, and we come up to this place where we're going to turn in. And before we went across this ditch, I said, does a four-wheel drive work on this truck? Oh, yes, brother, it works. All right, let's go. And we started across the ditch, and the four-wheel drive doesn't work. And so we worked, and after about 30 minutes, we got the truck unstuck, and we got it up on the other side of the ditch. And lo and behold, we forgot that there's locking hubcaps on the front of the truck. The four-wheel drive worked. So, anyway, it was an adventure. And just an adventure. I'll leave it at that. But anyway, so we drove this hour and a half out to this place, and we had a little study around this sister's home. And this is I can't remember her name at the moment, but this is her son and daughter. And 20 years ago, she was a charismatic preacher. And in Lorica, the preacher's name is Carlos, and he found her and converted her. Now what's really sad is 19 years ago, when Colombia had a lot of problems with war and the rebel groups, and this part of Colombia is still populated by a lot of rebel groups, the communist rebels executed her son on this property right in front of her. And she decided not to leave, but to stay. And it's a good thing she did, because she found the gospel. And she has decided to stay there, and she wants to start a church in that area. And her son and her daughter are going to encourage her to try to stay and help start that congregation. But we drove an hour and a half out to her property to study with her and encourage her. That's part of Carlos' work. Then later that night, we went another hour or so from there to another place. And this is in a school. And we met with about 20 people who are not Christians. They're all from the local area, made up of various religious groups. But they heard we were coming. They wanted to study with us. So we had almost a 4-hour study under this grass hut on a Wednesday night. And after that study, 3 people wanted to be baptized. And so it was just an incredible night. Carlos has been going out there for several months, trying to study with these individuals and encourage them to become Christians. And it looks like there's going to be a congregation starting this little town. It's called New Town in English. I didn't see a town. I just saw a collection of huts in this little school. But the poverty in this part of Colombia, again, is off the charts. So this is the house. This is the next day. This is the house of one of the brothers, the new Christians, the new people we baptized. And we were going in there, and they wanted me to change so I could baptize them. And off to the right, this is just one room, and it's got divided by a curtain. And they sent me in to this one room to change clothes so we could go do the baptism. And I'm looking around. There's nothing in the room but a rolled up mattress on the dirt that they would lay out every night on the dirt floor. There's no clothes anywhere. The only clothes these people had are what they were wearing. They cook out behind that. You can kind of see the grass hut roof behind the house here. But I want you to imagine, okay, this is March 21st, so it's the spring equinox. The sun is directly overhead, and you're on the equator. I want you to think about how hot that tin roof gets. It's amazing. It is unbelievable how hot it gets. This is out behind the house, and the person in the front of the picture wearing the sling, she's one of the ones we baptized. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So here we are, all crowded in this little truck, and go down to the place to baptize. I don't know if you could fit more people in that truck or not. And by the way, in the back seat of the truck, there's probably 5 or 6 people, and Jaime and me in the very front. So it was kind of crowded. But we all went down to the place to do the baptism, and it was a hike, about a mile hike off the road into this place, and this is what we found. There's a little stream, the waterfall, and that water in the middle of that little place is about 20 feet deep. Off to the right of that, there's a ledge, and people were jumping off in there to go swimming. I almost did, but I decided against it. Anyway, we baptized these 3 individuals that afternoon. It just really made for an incredible day. That lady is 78 years old. It's this guy's mother. And then we baptized his wife. But that could be the beginning of the church in Newtown. So we're really excited about that. Here we are afterward, after they've been baptized into Christ. This is the place of the church meets in Lorica. This is about an hour and 45 minutes from where we were earlier that day. And they've just finished this little building. They're very happy with it. But again, it is so mega hot inside that building that night. And here we are inside the building for worship. And they packed it out. They packed it out, standing room only. And this is the evangelist in that little town of Lorica, Carlos Carrera. And that's his wife to his left, and then his 5 children. Okay, he lives on about $300 or $400 a month. He travels all over the northwestern part of Colombia, preaching and teaching. You see how little that guy is? He's shorter than my wife, and that's pretty short. I mean, I just look huge, that guy. But anyway, he's a great man. He's a great man, and he's doing an incredible work. And they travel, again, this guy travels at his own expense to preach the gospel. And the house he lives in is just a little short, little tiny thing, little 3-bedroom block house. And his restroom facilities, he has a commode, and I don't think he doesn't have a sink. But then off to the right of that is a basin that they fill with water, and it has a little bowl that you use to take a shower with.